space is going to be. And I did some research. I've been to this building. Some of you know it. It's 3500 Parkdale Avenue, right above the Woodbury Kitchen in Woodbury. And I saw a space there that kind of suited my needs. And right then I was like, man, this is it. And so the building is still kind of truly an artist and a building of making, right? A lot of the other buildings, such as where Goy Girl Press is, there's a lot of writers, lawyers, businesses, non-artists that slowly kind of take over the space because rent kind of gets jacked up. In here, there's a lot of artists, mostly all artists. This is a photographer. I took this shot from the fire escape in the back, and she brings a lot of her clients outside and takes pictures of them in this industrial area, the rough part of Woodbury. So she had this family out there, and they were all like skipping around and giving each other piggybacks while she shot photographs of them and everything. I just totally imagine they're from the county and they'll never come back to Baltimore again after they get their photographs. Down the street is Woodbury Kitchen. It's kind of a cool area. The building that I'm in it's not really low rent. It's still kind of edgy, and it's still not really nice, so the rent is kind of affordable. And it's so cheap they can't really get a proofreader. Lauren Brick, a friend of mine, noticed this. They spelled emergency wrong there. So walking up to my space, you kind of go up this concrete ramp through this loading dock door. The nice thing about the building in the area, it's literally the last building before Druid Hill Park. So it's like really private and actually really kind of quiet and gorgeous. This is the hallway leading down to my shop. And as you kind of go through the door, I had this raw space that I had to fill. And it was cool because I was talking to David earlier about like designing spaces and figuring out where all your stuff is going to be and the most efficient way to do that. I knew that I was going to be working with artists and I wanted them to be as comfortable as they possibly could when they came in. So I put like this little kitchenette in there and a little private bathroom so people didn't have to wander up and back down the halls and everything like that. The press is not fun to move. Cost-wise, it was $1,500 to move it less than a mile away. But it was properly set up by my other mentor, Perry Tymason, who's there helping me out, and there's my butt crack. And he helps me out a lot with with material and actually sends a lot of artists down to me from New York. Setting up the space and being kind of organized is something I've kind of learned through the years of being a printmaker, and something I have to be for other artists to come in is extremely organized and ready for them to come in and work. I was lucky enough to kind of set up this joint. When I moved, I was in the middle of a project with this guy, Juan Logan, and I'd met him through Goy Girl Press, and we had started an independent project together. And so it kind of started in my old shop in my backyard, and it was the first project that I actually started to finish in my new space here. And we started thinking about like how we're going to finish this project and what was it and what is this project anyway and how did we even meet. So he was invited by Martha to make a print, and we developed a relationship. And the cool thing is that when you work with the artist, it's really it's a relationship you start with somebody. It's just not handing over a drawing or a project. It's actually spending time with that person, learning about the work and really kind of what they want visually. And it's awesome for me because I get to hear all these crazy stories, right? And it's one thing to see a piece of artwork on the wall and there might be an artist statement, but really when you work with somebody, you really get to understand the project at hand and a bunch of smaller stories also. So he had these 17th century or 18th century shackles that somebody had given him, these slave shackles. And he had them for 20 years and he always wanted to do something with them and couldn't really figure it out. And he brought them into the shop, and he had these beautiful little, like 4-inch by 4-inch, they were just like a really quick ink drawing, like an ink wash that he did with a brush. And they were kind of these shapes, and he said, this is kind of what I'm thinking. I want to do something with these things. And so we didn't really know how we were going to approach it. So we started thinking about materials. You have to think about different kinds of printmaking techniques, right? So there's 4 major kind of printmaking techniques: relief printing, etching, lithography, and screen printing. And as a printmaker, you have to decide which one is going to best suit this artist, what is really going to convey what they have to say. And so this thing started out as a lithograph, and I don't want to get geeky technically in this talk or anything like that, but we ended up doing these as etching. So we actually laid down these shackles on a clear piece of film, and we actually spray painted over those shackles and lifted them up. And then lo and behold, it kind of left this kind of ghostly shadow of the object that was before. It wasn't enough to really make an image or make the image, so we actually scanned those with a big drum scanner digitally, and we kind of touched them up in the computer, and we started to manipulate the film a little bit. That kind of turned out to be not exactly what we wanted, so we took that digital film and he actually spray painted it on even more and manipulated the film even more, and then we got to the final image, which was a series of 6 prints, etchings, and they were called Ghosts. And we started the project 8 years before it was finished. So we started a long time ago, and then through just time, he got busy, I got busy, we finally reconnected and then finished the project. And I think it's when you spend enough time with an image, figuring it out, hopefully the better that image is going to be. I'm kind of proud of these images. They won the Artist Printmaker Award at the Baltimore Museum of Art's print fair a couple years ago. And I kind of owe it all to Juan and his patience and his eye for detail and work. Some of the artists I work with are local people. This is a diptych by Deborah Rubino. It's an etching. There are a few ways that I work and how print shops work. There's a contract, which means that the artist comes to me and wants to do a project. I give them the scope of that project, what the cost is going to be. Cost is like really important to kind of get down with whoever you're working with, whether it's published or a contract. And so you talk about the size, the physical size of the print, how many colors it's going to be, and how many they want, how many works on paper do they actually want. And so a contract is when they just pay me straight up. I have a rate that I charge, and I say, it's going to cost this much. Deposit, and you get the end of it when I get the end of it when the editions are printed. There's publishing, which means that somebody else takes that cost, which is really kind of the best thing for me. When somebody else, there's a third party involved, which kind of was involved with this project I did with this performance artist, William Popel. We did this a couple years ago. I was approached by the Franklin Furnace organization out of Brooklyn, New York, and they deal with a lot of performances and performance artists, and she wanted me to work with this guy, Popel. So that meant she was going to pay for everything, the whole project, which is awesome because we can get together and concentrate on the work at hand, not where the money is going to come in from, and hey, you said we're going to do this. It's on somebody else, and it kind of makes it nice and clean. So Popel had this idea, and you guys can ask any questions. Feel free to stop me if you need to ask me anything. He had never made a print before, and he was in Vermont at that time, and we started talking about the possibilities of making a print. Like, what is a print? What does it consist of? So it's almost like educating him, and then in turn, he's educating me about what he wants, how he works, what he wants in the end. When I started to explain to him about lithography, he was really interested in the traditional stone lithograph. He really liked that rock, and what could he do with it because of this historical factor in printmaking. And we decided that we were going to put his image of his grandmother on this stone and not actually print from it, but actually make multiples of stones with the same image on it. So instead of additioning things on paper, it was actually going to be a multiple of stones. So we went in search of lithographic stones. Syracuse, is it University of Syracuse? What is that? That's what it is, University. I just made it up. They had an archive of lithographic stones that they weren't using anymore. And so we bought 15 to 20 stones, the exact same size that we needed. So we went up to Syracuse, picked them up, and prepared them for his images. And this was all done long distance. There's no reason for him to be there. He pretty much knew the image, the size, and everything that he wanted. Sometimes in collaborating, this material part of it was like the challenge for me. Like, where the hell was I going to find these stones? How was I going to prepare them? How was I going to get them all here? That's fun to me. Like, I love being challenged like that. The actual image was not a huge challenge. One of the cool things about it, the back of these stones, the stones came from an old ceramic factory, so they actually print on transfer paper and transfer these to ceramics and then bake them. So each image has its own unique back of a ceramics design on the back. And so we pretty much finished that collaboration. He came and he messed around in the shop a little bit, but then again, after having him in the shop, just overseeing for a day or two what was happening, so we could actually sign these rocks, these stones also. He actually came into Baltimore, and we developed an artist printmaker relationship, which is kind of cool for me, because you always want to try to find somebody who's relevant or excited about making prints, and he was one of them. The other way I work also is I actually publish people. So I actually publish a few people. Usually it's a friend of mine who will help me publish, which means he knows that financially sometimes are hard. He's got cash, and he is a good friend, and he really supports what I do. So occasionally he'll take care of materials and labor, et cetera. So I had this dude, Bill Fick, who's an artist out of North Carolina, come down. This is a former student, Ariane Clark, came down to help with this particular project, as did a lot of other students through MICA. So even though I don't teach there anymore, they kind of still find me. And I totally owe like a lot of thanks for anybody who comes into that shop and helps me out to make the work. I really need an extra hand every once in a while, and there's somebody really eager to get in. Bill Fick, like a lot of these projects with people from out of town, a lot of things are predetermined. The imagery, a lot of it's digital imagery. If it's not, they send me physical things to work with, and we'll start to kind of work on a project, and we'll start to tweak colors and how we're going to do them. With this particular project, Bill's work really comes out of a comic book history, and also kind of a deep historical political satire background. Back in the 80s, Bill did these large woodcuts of images, and they've kind of slowly through the years kind of condensed into these heads that he actually does, these comic figure heads and these characters that they make. These are like little progression proofs, so I thought, I always like dropping next color on a print. That really kind of excites me, because you don't really know what it's going to look like until you run it through the press. And even as many years as I've been doing this, I still get excited, man, when that paper comes off the plate. And because you never know what it's going to look like from impression to impression as well. And so when I publish, I'll actually retain the images, and the prints are sold, and then we split them 50-50 with the artist, is usually how that goes when something is published or kind of co-published. This press is pretty awesome. I'm like really lucky that I got it from my buddy Dan. It's an offset press, which means it's not a direct press. So direct press is when you go from matrix to paper. An offset press, it actually gets offset on a big rubber blanket. So I have an impression bed, and then I have a paper bed. So it takes the impression from whatever I'm printing from, a relief block, a lithography plate, a stone, whatever I'm printing from, and then transfers it to another press. And it's really changed the way I think about printing and the way I teach printing, actually. Here's the end result on this. It was actually a three-color lithograph, basically cyan, magenta, and yellow. And then the black is actually part of his linoleum block. So he actually cut the linoleum to fit right on top. Well, actually, the color was fit to fit the black part of this drawing. That's Kat. She's an intern, volunteer. She helps out a lot. And that's Ray, and you can't see Maddie in there. There's all three of them that help with this project and put in endless amount of hours for just food, which I think I'd be cheaper paying them cash. You can see that leather roller, that blue roller. It's actually a piece of rubber blanket around a giant cylinder, and these are actually lithographic plate in the middle, and then the actual paper that I'm printing on. So there was some promotional things that you have to do to kind of get set up. And during this promotional work, I really want to get other people involved. I think it's like the true nature of collaboration. I know that a lot of artists feel a little secluded, and I think when you get out of an art school environment, I think one thing you miss that you used to hate are your peers, because you miss that that response and that critique that you actually get from friends, unless you have a really tight-knit art crowd that you hang around in. When you get in your mid-30s and 40s, it's, you know, you kind of move away from these groups and you kind of get isolated in your own space. So for a lot of people that come to me, sometimes I'm thinking they're not really wanting to make a print. They just want to get the hell out of their space and get into a new place to make some work. And it kind of makes them think about other things when they're out of their own space and out of their own environment. And that's something I have to really think about when I work with somebody, because it's probably like some of you maybe musicians or walking into a recording studio that you're not used to, or even having the pressure, quote unquote, walking into a space to make work that's not yours. The space isn't yours, right? You don't know it. You have to make them comfortable, you know, and this is like your space while they're in there. So whoever I'm working with, I try to make them as comfortable as they can be, and so they can really kind of concentrate on the work at hand. And so I got my friend Mary Mashburn, who has a letterpress in town. She actually teaches at MICA as well. And I wanted to get somebody else involved in this as well. So she actually printed the type for me at her shop for this poster. I think I might have an image somewhere of it. No, maybe I don't. That's Shannon LaRue, hard at work, doing the texting. And she came in to help with this project as well. Here's some of the images that Bill produced there. We put it a poster, some things to try to let people kind of walk away from. I have an open house once a year, or once every 2 years really, where I really want to try to get as many people in that space as possible so they know I'm still alive and breathing, and they can actually see where stuff is made. And that's Bill. So Bill rolled into town. I try to get people lectures that come into town. Like, I don't like to keep them all to myself. So he did a lecture and a demo at MICA, and I like to share the folks that kind of come in. And that's Bill drinking a beer after he saw the prints. And for any kind of interns that come in here, incidentally, Ray did not cut herself in my shop with those 2 fingers wrapped up. That was an injury outside the shop. Is to get interns kind of involved. They don't get credit and they don't get paid. So what's in it for them, right? Hopefully, like, learning a few things that that are not really taught where they are by certain instructors. I can maybe offer a little bit more. So it's kind of really cool to get them involved and actually the curating and signing of prints and getting them involved in the artist, right? Because I think there's a lot of people that you admire and you're afraid to talk to them or you're afraid to approach them, especially when you're younger. But artists, for the most part, are pretty giving and kind of cool to be around with. So she kind of knew Bill's work for a while, but she's actually, you know, had a chance to get to know him a little bit in the shop. And these are some pieces that we kind of produced, some of Bill's work and the press and the space. So along with you know, some of the quote-unquote regulars that come in, maybe once or twice a year, I've started to publish a few people, and kind of some really talented local people, I think like sophiajacob and Nudishank, and a lot of places that show kind of younger Baltimoreans and even people from out of town. It's really good to see good, fresh work. And Hermione Only and John Bowl are 2 people that I had always met. Well, I take it back. I knew who they were. I kind of give them a nod from across the room, and I really didn't meet them. And I kind of knew their work. And a good friend of mine, I owe it to Lauren Brick to like really show me some of the artists that she likes. She has a really good eye. And she said, you might be interested in Hermione's work and John Bowles' work. And I started really looking at their work thinking, oh yeah, these would be really good prints. And as a printmaker, I can't not look at work and think, man, how could I make this a print? And how could this happen? and then you step back and see the work for what it is, right? And so I asked Hermione to come in. I did get a small grant to have her and John come in, which basically maybe paid for some materials. That's about it. When I work with somebody, it's never like they come into the shop blindly, like, hey man, what are we gonna make? It's like, months before, I look at their work, think what I can do with them. We have communications via email. They'll come into the shop, show them examples of what I've done, what the possibilities are, and then we'll start to play, right? And that's the great thing about like working with artists over a long period of time over one piece of artwork, right? So sometimes like financially it doesn't add up. So Hermione and John both have come into the shop in the past, I guess since the beginning of July, and we just now finished, actually the prints aren't even printed yet. They're, one's printed and done, but I have to print another one. But it's through like really this slow brooding process of proofing and making the work that the work really kind of turns and takes form. Some of the things that I think about are like limits that you have to give artists, right? If you give an artist, an unlimited amount of space, of paper, of color, or anything, you'll never get it done, right? You'll never ever get it done. So there's got to be a limit on what the possibilities are. So I usually give people like 5 color trial proofs to nail their particular image, and that's it. So it puts a lot of pressure on them and me, but there's a deadline. There's like, okay, this is going to be done like now, man, because otherwise you keep on printing and keep on printing. And so Hermione came in. Some artists don't like, actually I don't like them to touch any of my stuff, but some of them want to get actively involved in mixing ink and actually a little bit of part of the process other than drawing. And so here's Hermione looking at this first image and this first proof that she had this idea that she wanted to make this this image about surface, about material surface. And we kind of came up with this lithograph, and she had drawn all the plates by hand. There was a little bit of digital work within the concrete structure there, but all of them were kind of hand-cut rubyliths and hand-done work. And for me, that's what I love, and that's one thing I love about printmaking. It's just not a push-button print from a computer. It's actually this thing where you watch these people execute their craft. I hate using that term sometimes, but executing like their talent in my shop. Like I totally get off watching people like work in my shop and do their thing, and I admire that. Right? I can print it, but I can't draw it. And Hermione walked in, and I had this proof all put together for her, and we sat down. We're having coffee at the table, and she kind of did a double take because she saw the print hanging on the wall, and she walked up to it, and she's like, "That's not what I wanted." I said, "Okay," and so it kind of went from this digital form that she was so used to working on to seeing this thing on paper, and it was like, yeah, it doesn't do it. I said, okay, well, let's start from scratch. How about we do that? And so she had these other images in mind, and to watch this thing kind of unfold and to watch her process and her making take a turn, which was pretty awesome. So this print that she was working on was really about the surface. It was about the surface of these materials, about the surface of the paper. But what she really wanted was it to become the surface. And so we printed these images of basically poured concrete, and we did them in different colors until we really kind of found this one particular color scheme that really represented concrete for her. But we actually printed it on the front and the back of the paper. So actually you could walk around this print, and we're still trying to figure out how we're going to frame it and how it's going to go down and how this object can possibly be moved around a room if it needed to be, to see it. But it was an interesting challenge to print this thing like as it kind of wrapped around this paper. There's Anna. Where are you? She's sitting right there. So Anna was another person who got in touch with me and just said, hey, dude, I want to come in and get my hands inky and make some stuff. And I don't know, where I just saw you somewhere at the BMA, I think, when you were there.
I approached you after there was like a lecture.
Okay.
You presented
All right.
about printmaking.
So I put people to sleep somewhere else, and then
No,
you.
it was funny. It
Oh.
was funny.
So anyone would come in, and we were actually working with this guy, David Brown, who's an artist in town, and he's a self-publisher, so he pays for his own work when he comes in. He uses these certain shapes to make his imagery, and it's like it's almost kind of the shape of an eye, but it's like incredibly detailed. And he did this series called Numerals. These are lithographs that we printed. Basically printed like a black solid and then dropped this metallic ink on top of these letters and these forms. And it was kind of challenging to figure out how we were going to do it, how that ink's going to lay, and to really get what he wanted to get. Then this dude came in. This guy's name is John Bull, and he's pretty awesome. John, I actually invited John to come in the shop, and I think he thought there was a catch or something like that. And I said, no, dude, I really like your work, and I want you to come in and we can talk about like a project we can work on. And so what an artist will do is bring in, like I said before, some work that they've previously done or something they're excited about still. And then technically we talk about like how can we do that? How can we make this image? John is a busy man, and he's got a couple day jobs. So we work in the evening when he comes over to the shop. So usually I'll work with somebody during the day, have a little break, and then during John and Hermione's work with me, they come in the evening, and we try to make it happen. What I mean about like working with people and learning from them, and I always feel that about my students as well. It's like how fun can it be to teach if like you're not learning at the same time? And I always like really want people to bring something to the table. And John brought like a challenge. He wanted to use his tool of choice, which is an airbrush. He uses a lot in his work, and I've done a lot of spray paint work, but not really this fine airbrush kind of technique that he wanted to begin. He's a really good airbrusher. So we start out by making this little test. First of all, we start about like what the hell are we going to make, and where is this going to go? So we talk about making this print, where it's going to live, how are we going to sell it, which is a huge thing, which we all have to think about earning a living and making money, hopefully in what we love to do. And then we all sacrifice and we supplement our income. So one thing that I wanted to talk to John about is I really felt strongly about his work. I felt there was enough people that have interest in his work that we could actually market and sell these prints. And not just do one print, but maybe like 2 or 3 prints in a series. I usually don't just do one impression, or one image rather. I'll do several images with people. So it's more than just one. And then I started to talk about time, like how long it takes to actually put into a project. And I think a lot of artists don't really think about that a lot of times, right? They just want to make stuff. And they're excited about it. And when it's done, 6 months, a year, a month later, it's like, well, like, how do I price this? And I'm like, well, how much time did you spend on it? Like, well, I don't know. Really? It's like, you got to know how much time you spend in on the project, and that's what I have to do. Like, really, I have to know exactly by the hour what I do for somebody or how long a project's going to take. Otherwise, it gets blown out of proportion, and you start to lose track of how much time and money is in a project. And so I started to talk about that with John. It was like, you have to think about your own your own price. When you're thinking about your prints, how much they're going to be, how much time you put into this. So John came to the shop, and we put in over 90 hours on this project, and that's from tests, printing, proofing, and everything else that's involved. This is not going to the next slide. There we go. And these are some of the tests on paper that he did. And then once we figured out, like, technically, yes, this is going to work, it was kind of game on. So it was John actually working with some of the materials that he's used to working with, and then I gave him some of the materials I'm used to working with, and then we started to really kind of build and develop this image. It's not a reproduction, right? It's not an image that was previously made by John. I like to kind of start fresh with an image that doesn't pre-exist somewhere else. And so John works with a lot of contact paper. There's a material called ruby litho that actually blocks out light. It's a photographic lithography process that we used. But just watching him work with these kind of these materials was just like it was a joy watching him kind of figure it out. And how much of the airbrush does he have to put on there, how little. It's always fun. And to watch this thing kind of unfold, bringing out the old school lithographic fan to dry his airbrushing before we shot his plates. There's John being all geeky. And then after the plates are made, we can start color trial proofing, so we can actually start to figure out the color scheme. He has an idea of what it is, but like I said before, you never know what those colors are going to look like until they're dropped on paper. You know, ink is a lot different than messing around with a computer or doing it digitally. Until you see it in the flesh and blood is when you see, oh man, that really looks awful. Let's try something else. Let's try a different color. And so we went through, and of course I broke the rules. We did about 30 color trial proofs trying to nail this thing. And these are pretty kind of awful images, but as far as the reproduction of them. So this is John. This is kind of his final image here. And it was a 3-color lithograph that he kind of nailed in 3 colors and really got a lot of dimension. And I think he was kind of pretty happy with it, I guess. Working with people long distance is kind of nerve-wracking sometimes, especially when artists come in. They have something in their mind, like how this project. I think all of us as artists, right? At first, like, is this spark and this idea that we have what this piece is going to be, and you know, in a utopian space or world, or there's artwork, you want to make stuff that can kind of float with nothing attached to it, and glistening and projections and all that stuff, and then you have this idea, start to put it on paper, and then the reality hits of, oh shit, this is not going to float in the air, so I got to figure out how to make it happen, how to do this. That's the fun part of making the work and the challenging part of the making the work. So I'm going to be working with this guy, William Popel again. He's actually going to give a lecture at MICA on Wednesday, I think, not in conjunction with what he's doing with me, but I got him a gig there to give a talk while he's here. But we've been kind of figuring out what he wants to do when he gets here. So it's like the pressure's on, man. It's like, you know, when you have 2.5 days to work with somebody and not 3.5 months to work with a local who's here and can come on demand, it's really trying to figure out what you want to make, how we're going to make it, and to get something he's happy with so he can go away. So the artists that come in, they don't sit there and watch me print all their impressions or anything like that. I'll never forget when, you know, back, a long time ago when I was learning about prints, and I would see like a John's print or, you know, Ollenberg print, and I would think, oh man, it's so cool that he printed this. And they're like, no, he didn't print that. Somebody else printed that. And I was like, oh, really? That sucks. And then here I am printing everybody else's stuff, right? So what happens is they come in, they have an idea of what they want to do, and I'll get something down, hopefully on paper. It's called a BAT or bon tirer, good to pull. They actually sign it, saying, this is what I want, man. And then they go away, and I get to it. You know, hopefully in the next month or two, I'll print that edition. I've saved colors. I can match that color completely. The plates are already made, and I'll just execute that work, and they'll come by later to sign it. So Popel wanted this kind of weird rainbow roll thing. I couldn't exactly figure out what he wanted. So I just kind of did some tests, which he started really liking these tests, and he's going to drop some of his images on top of these rainbow rolls next week. So we got to figure out, he's got to draw these in the shop. And so it's a lot of prep work. So like I say, nothing really happens. It's usually like a month or two of planning in advance, what you need. And then there's like the great Baltimore industrial part of Baltimore is that, you know, you can get stuff done on the fly. You know, you've been in Baltimore long enough, you know who can route this wood for you, who has a laser cutter that you can jump into really quickly, who has the materials, the paper, the inks. If you don't have them, you need to get them really quickly. And Baltimore has been one of those places that actually kind of works out for me like that. You know, you're in town long enough, you start developing a decent relationship with people and a work relationship with people. So, the financial part of running a shop and making ends meet, that's a difficult thing. And it doesn't happen a lot that people actually come out and say, hey, how do you do this, man? How do you stay afloat? And I kind of embrace those questions. I don't think I really would ask my artist buddies. David Hess, who has a small little empire out in Phoenix, Maryland. I don't know, he just has so many resources and this is a gorgeous shop. And it just, I kind of admire his work and his space and everything and how he does it. But to really be kind of dedicated as is Sophia Jacob and dedicated to artists and actually be out and about and seeing work and making work and actually getting people into the shop is like really, really important to me. And sometimes if there's no work, I just want to print, man. I just want to do work with people, man. And there's always this threshold. You have a lot of former students and everything, and they never come out and say, hey man, can you print this for me, or can we do a project together? I think they're afraid I'm going to give them a bill or something like that. But I'm always I have like a 5-year slop time of former students and helping them out to when they gotta pay. And but I'm always willing to kind of help out people, whether it's introducing them to somebody or whatever it may be. One of my former students, unfortunately, is following in my footsteps. She went to Tamron after Micah, and then she's in New York now, actually working with a printmaker that I've always wanted to work with. So she's got this little dream job that she didn't just land into. She really is dedicated and made a lot of contacts through her time at Micah and beyond. But yeah, that's kind of it. I don't know, there's maybe some other questions. I had a whole, I just didn't want to bombard people with images and stuff like that. And so if there's anything that you'd want to ask or anything like that. Yeah, always. I mean, that's the thing. I'm constantly getting, inquiries and constantly getting work. Sometimes I wonder how to help people find me and how do they come in to work with me. And, but they kind of do. And so, yeah. Yeah.
So, I worked in the print shop at Towson last year, and I noticed, the nature of being in a print shop is kind of like everyone's milling about, bumping into one another, and even more so than maybe a computer lab or a painting studio where you are around other people. You're really forced to confront those people, either in the physical space or whatever. How much of that do you think versus the actual printmaking process influenced you, or what's the combination of the two that influenced you to continue on that track?
Well, probably all of that. I think the camaraderie on, those of you who've never been in a school setting of a print shop, it's unique among any other studios in a school, period. There's nothing like it. And it makes you be collaborative in nature because you're on top of each other, because you're constantly seeing what people are making and constantly offering advice. And there's always somebody who's advanced in a certain level and kind of weak here, and then there's another person who's advanced here and weak here, and just to watch that happen, helping each other out, it just happens in that print shop. I don't know, it's probably a lot of the instruction that happens in a print shop, and the teachers, a lot of the instructors are collaborative printmakers who have done a lot of collaborative work. And so all of that just totally turns me on and turned me on about kind of making decisions with people and making something with somebody else. I think that's what I really, really like to do. It's kind of the nature of what I do. Yeah. What else? Nothing?
How much of your work, how much of this is your work? Are you still working on, obviously you're making all of these things, but are you making your own imagery?
No, I broke a rule that one of my mentors said. He goes, man, for every 3 people you work with, you've got to work on your own stuff. And I don't. I'm so engulfed with other people's stuff, and I have I have 60 students, and I don't do my own work that much. I'm not one of those artists who's man, I'm so unhappy because I haven't done my work. But my work is working with other people. That's what I really like to do. And so, in a way, no, it's not my work, but it is my work at the same time. I totally get that out of my system and totally get off on printing and printing other people's works and stuff. That way I can blame the shitty images on them, not me. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, man.